Okay, so we are in Job chapter 20. Uh, this is coming off of what a lot of people consider as, as I mentioned before, Job 19 being the high point of Job's faith or the expressions of his faith in the coming Redeemer. Very high point there. And uh, Zophar, of course, and all of Job's friends totally miss it. They don't see what Job is saying. They're looking at it completely from a different point of view, right? They've been trying to convince Job of his sinfulness. And the basic arguments that they've been using are that God doesn't afflict people who are innocent. God doesn't afflict people who are not guilty, that the things that are happening to you are happening because you're a sinner. And that's basically been their whole argument. They start it from one end. One end is um, God, these things are happening, therefore bad things are happening to you. These things that happen to you look like God's judgment, and so therefore you must have done something. And that's sad to say. Zophar is going to offer no new argument. He's going to use that argument once again, but he starts off a little miffed. He's a little bit offended by what Job has just said. So if you remember at the end of Job 19, Job had said to his friends, he had warned them. He had said, you don't understand what's going on. God is doing this to me for his own purposes. I'm innocent. I didn't bring this upon myself. And the more you attack me and say that I'm guilty, the more you're misrepresenting God. And so you're in danger of God having words with you, judging you. And so you need to be careful about that, Job had said. And Zophar, I think, starts off, he's going to refer to being offended. And I think those are the words that offended him, that that he might somehow be in the wrong with God. So this chapter has two parts. The first three verses talk about Zophar's motivation, and I've already mentioned he feels offended, and so he must defend himself. That's his motivation. That's the one he gives for speaking up here. He has nothing new to say. He's just going to say the same thing again, and he's going to characterize what he says as basically a description of the day of the Lord's wrath against the wicked, or the day of God's wrath against the wicked. And he actually uses that terminology, the day of God's wrath, in verse 28 to describe what he's been talking about. So we'll start off by reading. I'll start off by reading Job 20. Then Zophar the Naamathite answered and said, therefore my thoughts answer me because of my haste within me. I hear censure that insults me, and out of my understanding a spirit answers me. So I'm going to read that in the NIV. So that was the ESV. It's very helpful, especially in the poetic sections of the Old Testament, to read more than one translation, because the poetic sections are uh, very difficult to translate, and they have a lot of nuance, or also a lot of options, as we've seen in how things can be translated. So the first three verses in the NIV sound like this. Then Zophar the Naamathite replied, my troubled thoughts prompt me to answer because I am greatly disturbed. I hear a rebuke that dishonors me, and my understanding inspires me to reply. That sounds a lot more, in my mind, that's probably closer to what he means than the translation of the ESV, especially verse 3 there, where the ESV says, I hear censure that insults me. So that's accurate. But then this, and out of my understanding, a spirit answers me. So the NIV has that last line, and my understanding inspires me to reply. So spirit inspires, that's the word being translated there. NIV, I think, is going the right way there. The other option is to think that this is like, who was it? Was it Bildad? It was Bildad in chapter 4, I think. No, it was Eliphaz. Eliphaz in chapter 4, who had heard a spirit had come and spoken to him in the night. That's kind of what the ESV sounds like here in verse 3, but that's not what's going on. All that Zophar is saying is that I'm offended and I understand what's going on, and so I'm going to respond. Um, and then the rest of the chapter, we'll go ahead and read that before we get into the notes. Verse 4. Do you not know this from of old, since man was placed on earth, that the exulting of the wicked is short, and the joy of the godless is but for a moment? This is the thesis. This is the key verse, chapter 5, verse 5 there. The exulting of the wicked is short, and the joy of the godless is for a moment. And he says, don't you already know this, Job? You know this, don't you? Um, then he's going to go on to say, why do you act the way you do? You already know this is true. You're not going to get away with your wickedness, is going to be his implication. But he's going to now describe how the joy of the godless is just for a moment, and the exulting of the wicked is uh, very short. Verse 6. Though his height mount up to the heavens and his head reach to the clouds, he will perish forever like his own dung. Those who have seen him will say, where is he? He will fly away like a dream and not be found. He will be chased away like a vision of the night. The eye that saw him will see him no more, nor will his place any more behold him. His children will seek the favor of the poor, and his hands will give back his wealth. His bones are full of his youthful vigor, but it will lie down with him in the dust. Though evil is sweet in his mouth, though he hides it under his tongue, though he is loath to let it go and holds it in his mouth, yet his food is turned in his stomach. It is the venom of cobras with him. He swallows down riches and vomits them up again. God casts them out of his belly. He will suck the poison of cobras. The tongue of a viper will kill him. He will not look upon the rivers, the streams flowing with honey and curds. He will give back the fruit of his toil and will not swallow it down. From the profit of his trading, he will get no enjoyment, for he has crushed and abandoned the poor. He has seized a house that he did not build. Because he knew no contentment in his belly, he will not let anything in which he delights escape him. There was nothing left after he had eaten, therefore his prosperity will not endure. In the fullness of his sufficiency, he will be in distress. The hand of everyone in misery will come against him. To fill his belly to the full, God will send his burning anger against him and rain it upon him into his body. He will flee from an iron weapon, a bronze arrow will strike him through. It is drawn forth and comes out of his body. The glittering point comes out of his gallbladder. Terrors come upon him. Utter darkness is laid up for his treasures. A fire not fanned will devour him. What is left in his tent will be consumed. The heavens will reveal his iniquity, and the earth will rise up against him. The possessions of his house will be carried away, dragged off in the day of God's wrath. This is the wicked man's portion from God, the heritage decreed for him by God. So, unless I'm mistaken, I don't see anything new there in what has already been said by Job's friends. It's another example of the description of how God deals with the wicked. And it describes God's justice as being quick and the wicked's enjoyment of his wickedness short, and that the purpose of God's judgment on the wicked in this life is so that everybody can see that he was wicked, so his wickedness could be exposed. And that's verse 27. The heavens will reveal his iniquity, and the earth will rise up against him. So, in Zophar's view and in the view of his friends, as we said before, um, the lost my train of thought. As I said something before. Lost it. Sorry. So I'm sure we'll have occasion to repeat it though, whatever it was. I got distracted momentarily by a pop-up on the screen, and so lost my train of thought.
You mean the part that said that the AI companion is on?
Something like that. Yeah, I'm like, okay, what? I had to give it permission. I don't even know what it is.
He gave a message or something that about us being in your system, on your in your address, whatever. It was
Okay.
a recording of some sort.
Yeah, something
Sorry,
like that.
I turned on AI Companion since I joined a few minutes late and I can't get into my email. I was hoping to get a link to the class
Oh,
without bothering anybody,
oh,
Huh,
okay.
but I
No
bothered
worries.
everybody. Made you
it
forget while
was
you were
your
here.
fault, huh?
There it
No
is.
worries.
There's the link. It's in the
Chuck,
chat, I
I
think.
thought
It's
you
in
were
the,
getting a message that your cloud storage was almost full and that you needed to cough up some
yeah,
money
perhaps.
for
Yeah,
more storage.
that might happen. That might happen. So,
Yeah.
I did want to ask you guys what your feedback. Obviously, we're going to go through these verses with a little bit more detail, but do you see anything there that looks different, especially verses 4 to 28? Does any of this sound new?
No,
Yeah.
The same.
it was
That's
terrible to read it again.
Yeah.
One more shot. You just won't quit.
yeah. The insistence is that God that God judges the wicked in this life, and that's what's happening to you, Job. And it's not going to last very long. And he says in verse 4, do you not know this from of old? Don't you know this? This has been the case since all of history began. Just look around you.
Mhm.
Everybody knows this. And Job is going to use the argument that everybody that we all think of, which is, I have looked around and this doesn't happen. But apparently Zophar's never been confronted with actual reality at this point, and he thinks that this is what God is doing all of the time. So I wanted to start out just by making a couple of observations about Zophar's motivation. If you have the outline, you can see, he's been dishonored, he thinks, and so he has to defend himself. And I wonder, you know, why not rather be dishonored? That's what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6:7. He says, you know, what's the big deal? Just be dishonored, right? It's not
Pride.
yeah, pride. Yeah, pride.
Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
Um,
My inward agitation.
yeah, inward agitation, right? You've offended me. You've suggested that perhaps I'm in the wrong with God.
Yeah.
What is the
Hmm.
right response? What is the right response to that? Isn't it
What does God say?
perhaps I am? Let me humbly seek the Lord's instruction on this.
There should
Isn't,
be something that makes him go, hmm.
yeah. How dare you say I'm wrong? Yeah, it's kind of like you got two parties in an argument and they're both saying the same thing, right? Job is saying, you just don't get it. You keep saying I'm wrong and I'm not. Stop saying I'm wrong. You're wrong for saying I'm wrong. And then the other guy says, you're wrong for saying I'm wrong. And then it just goes like that, right?
That's what verse 3 sounds like. Just exactly that. I listen to the reproof, which insults me, comma, and the spirit
Uh-huh.
of my understanding makes me answer. So what do you think you're going to hear? It's right there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Just
just
more
being,
of the, yeah, go
go ahead.
ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
That was it. It was just like it started in verse 2. I mean, he's disquieted. He's inward agitation, insult, spirit of my understanding. It's like he's just laying it out there. I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm getting tired of it.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we should be careful about not imitating that. And
Yes.
I think I'm sure that I've
Yeah.
done that. I'm responding in self-righteousness. This is self-righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
This is what self-righteousness looks like.
Yeah.
It's childish. It's whiny. It's how dare
It's
you?
not humble.
No, it's not humble. It's the opposite of humble. Um, so then in Matthew 5:39 to 40, Jesus says, do not resist the one who is evil. Now, Job's not evil, right? But Zophar thinks that Job is acting like an evil person. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And I think metaphorically, an insult you can say this applies to an insult, right? It's a slap in the face, metaphorically. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you or take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. So not only is it a tolerant attitude where the person says, okay, I'm just going to take it and not fight back, but verse 40 of what Jesus says, if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well, is actually be generous. Have an attitude of blessing and giving toward the person who is attacking you. So that is quite far from what Zophar is demonstrating here. I think about when Paul says, that there must be, he says in some sense, there must be disagreements among you to show which one of you is right. And I think what he means is which one of you is acting righteously, thinking righteously. Not so much about a scorecard. Oh, your point is good. You're right. But which one of you is acting right in the contention, in the argument, in the friction? Which one of you is acting righteously? And it's the difficult times that expose our hearts and our immaturity. And that's what's going on there. Yes, Catherine. I think that was Catherine.
No,
I think it was Susan.
Susan, go ahead.
I do want to point out that this is the first response of the flesh, and I'm guilty of that. And it's a hard thing to turn your cheek, very hard thing, because the flesh don't want to do that. We want to stand up and say, but I have a word to say, and I have what I think is correct. We have this idea that what we think is correct and everybody else is wrong. And I think that's what this guy's basically doing, is the first reaction, I think, of the flesh when he thinks he's been wronged.
Yeah, he's definitely doing that. And it occurs to me that part of the, because we're going to get another character introduced in a little bit, right? In a couple more chapters, and then we'll have Elihu, who's not spoken yet, who's been sitting here the whole time listening. And he's going to be mentioned a little bit later, and he's going to start speaking. And Elihu is going to say a lot of things that later in God's speeches, God is going to repeat. So Elihu is going to be kind of a John the Baptist type of character who's going to say things that God is going to say. And it occurs to me that these three friends and Job, they're all doing the same thing. There doesn't seem to be, there's no indication, I guess I'll say it like this, there's no indication that there's any significant time between, say, Job stopping his speech in chapter 19 and Zophar starting talking. It seems like it's like within a minute. Job has stopped, and now Zophar jumps in and starts saying something. And it seemed like that's the case even with Job. When his friends stop talking, Job starts talking. And nobody is, basically what they're arguing about is, what's God's viewpoint on this? Job says this is God's viewpoint, and his friends say this other thing is God's viewpoint, and they just go back and forth. And nobody's actually pausing and giving any space for the Holy Spirit to instruct them and for God to speak.
Good, Chuck.
And I think Elihu is going to fill that void. He's going to come in and say some things that God wants to say. But yeah, Gary.
I noticed in the first verse of chapter 20 in my translation, it's no sooner than Job stopped speaking, then Zophar, the Nathamite, replied, like there was, they had to cut off one chapter and start the next one someplace. So they it was immediate retort. The way it reads here, it's there like you say, there was no time to digest what Job has said. It just came right back to his opinion.
Yeah, I heard something really interesting about pausing spaces in conversations. Mr. Rogers, I think we all know who Mr. Rogers was. Maybe he is. I don't know if he's still with us. Um, but he wrote a book, uh, several books, but he was being interviewed about one book, and I watched this interview some time ago. And he said, the interviewer asked him what he thought was the most important part of the book. And he said, Fred Rogers did, it's the blank spaces between the paragraphs. So the blank spaces between the paragraphs and the blank spaces at spaces at the end of the page. He said those are the most important because they give you time to think about what's been said.
Mhm.
And and I thought, yeah, that's profound. No, um,
Mhm.
good stuff. We need that silence, right? We need that time between. Like there should be some time when Job stops talking that his friends are thinking about it, but that doesn't appear to be the case. And neither does it appear that Job is thinking. It seems like they're both thinking about what they're going to say while the other person is talking, which is the
Right.
worst way. That is the worst way to have a
Mhm.
conversation.
That's right.
Uh, so let's see
Well, I
about
think
Yeah, go ahead, Shirley.
I I think too, just in my experiences, uh, not only of myself, but even with some other people who have followed this principle for the most part. I mean, nobody's perfect, but for the most part, in times of disagreement, I have found it to be best to learn to uh, agree with, to not necessarily agree with them, but to accept the fact that they believe in what they believe, and then pray to God and ask God, Lord, if I'm wrong, show me. If they're wrong, show them, and agree to disagree.
Hmm, right. That's a
Now
godly way to. Yeah, it's the right way to do that. Yeah.
that's how I try to do it every time. Honestly, I really do. When there's a big disagreement, rather than just arguing, because I don't like arguing. I hate arguing, and it just gets me all tied in knots and nervous and a bunch of stuff. And depending on the argument, can even make me cry or whatever. And I don't want to be like that. So I try to quickly end it by immediately just agreeing to disagree and then praying to God about it. Like I said, Lord, if what Chuck says to me, yeah, if what Chuck says to me is wrong, please show him. But if what I'm saying is wrong, show me.
Mm, amen. Yeah. So I was thinking about why is it that these dialogues, this dialogue, uh, gives the impression of just basically a continuing escalating argument as you go through. And I think that there is a need, a felt need. It's not an actual need, but a felt need on the part of every participant in the book of Job so far to get the last word. You've got to get the last word in. My point has to be believed. I have to make it clear. And even in the discussion, I think that I think what's lacking is the attitude that, the battle belongs to the Lord. Whatever the Lord wants to
Right,
do, he'll do. I've said my piece. I don't need to keep
right,
repeating it. If the Lord
right,
wants to use it, he will. He doesn't need me to
right.
emphasize it anymore. And there's no contentment, no rest in the Lord that you see. All you see is this repetition of the same points, especially by Job's friends. Job is growing in his articulation of his faith, but Job's friends seem to be becoming more and more entrenched. And there's really no movement uh, they're not growing. They're not conceding any points. They're more entrenched and more, our view is right, your view is wrong, So what they need to do is stop talking, and because they've got nothing to say. I mean, they've said everything. We don't need to repeat it. So,
Chuck,
yes, Catherine.
I think you hit a really strong point here. Really, I do, because putting it that way, how there's no pause, is exactly what makes it sound like it is accelerating to the point where there's repetition. I'm going back, I've gone back as far as chapter 3 while you were talking. And every first verse starts out, and Job opened his mouth. Chapter 4, then Eliphaz the Temanite answered. Verse 5, call now, is there anyone who will answer you? Verse 6, then Job answered. It's exactly what you're saying. Chapter 7, is not man forced to labor on earth? Chapter 8, then Bildad the Shiite answered, and it goes on and on. Chapter 9, then Job answered. Chapter 10, I loathe my own life. There is no break in chapter 11. Then Zophar, the Namathite, answered. 11, 12, then Job responded. Do you see? It's exactly what you said. I'm just thinking to myself, why can't I see this? Why do I feel like it's just one continuation? Because it is. So thank you for that. I'm not going to go on and on, but it's exactly what you said. There's no pauses. There's nothing. It's just hotter than whatever. There's no letting up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think I got just one more comment about that, and then we'll look at some passages about Jesus and how he would have handled, how he did handle, and wants us to handle these types of situations. But so when you ask Christians, new Christians especially, people who've been Christians, say for a year or two, if they've read the book of Job, a lot of people find it hard to figure out what's going on, and it's tiring to read the book of Job. And I think it's tiring because there's no break. There's no rest.
Yeah.
So let's look at Isaiah 53, verse 7. This is about how Jesus responded when he was insulted and accused of things he didn't do. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. So we all know the context, right? This is describing the trials that he went through and all the accusations which were false, and his decision, his unwillingness to open his mouth and defend himself, because he'd already said everything, and because it was in the hands of God. So he just doesn't say more. And then Mark 13, I think I had Matthew 26, 52 to 63. This is a good example too. Then Jesus said to him, put your sword back into its place. He's talking to Peter. We all know the story. For all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled that it must be so? At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But all this has taken place that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. And all the disciples left him and fled. Okay, so just the short version of this is Jesus said, I could defend myself here, right? I could defend myself. I can call down 12 legions of angels and be delivered from this. But then how could God's word be fulfilled? And so the short version then is Jesus is silent so that God's word, Jesus says no word, so that God's word can be fulfilled. Verse 57, then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had gathered, and Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and going inside, he sat with the guards to see the end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking false testimony against Jesus that they might put him to death, but they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last 2 came forward and said, "This man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days. And the high priest stood up and said, Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you? But Jesus remained silent. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God to tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. And then he does respond to that, but he doesn't respond to the accusations. And so he's giving an example to us also. When we are doing God's work and we are accused of things, we've already shown our character and shown our allegiance, and it's really about the glory of God. So there's a time to be silent. John 19:10-11. Pilate said to him, You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the authority to release you and the authority to crucify you? Jesus answered him, You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin. So he doesn't defend himself again. He says something, but he's not defending himself. He's, and this is consistent. We've seen this. First Peter 2:22-23. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. There's none of that going on in the book of Job. You just don't see that. For all of Job's faith, which has been on display many times, he's not doing this. And his friends aren't doing this either. Right? It's there's no rest. They're not resting in the Lord. They're not resting in their argument. They are so much inner turmoil and pressure to say the thing that's going to turn the argument. And I think after maybe the first several chapters, after the first round of people talking, I think there comes a point in the book where we might be able to pinpoint it if we went back and looked at it. But I think they start out and they're concerned for Job. And I think throughout the book, they're concerned for Job, but there are 2 things that happen, right? At the beginning of the book, their concern for Job is really, really evident and high. Their annoyance with Job is almost non-existent at the beginning. But as the book goes on and they get more and more annoyed with Job, as they get annoyed with Job, as that grows, proportionally, their concern for Job and their willingness or their desire to help him diminishes until it becomes, I'm annoyed with Job and I've got to make my voice heard. And there is no more concern for Job. I think that's what's happening as we go through these dialogues. And like you said, Catherine, it's painful to read it. It's painful to read it, to see it. It's a good example of what not to do. And the reason we need a good example of what not to do is because, we've done that. And so we don't want to do that. That's not the point of Job, to give us a negative example like that. But it is something you can learn from it. So this very first part, where Zophar is hurt, insulted, and he responds kind of a knee-jerk reaction. I think it's good. I think it's been profitable to kind of talk about it like we did and say, is this the right way to respond? Is this how we should be? Is this really how the conversation should go? And it shouldn't go like that. There has to be some humility and some trusting in the Lord. So then the second part of his speech, this monologue, it's not even a discussion at this point. Yes, diatribe. Verses 4 to 28. He's describing the Lord's wrath against the wicked. His main point is to ask Job, why is he continuing in this wickedness? Because he knows that that's not going to last, and that God's going to destroy him, because God doesn't let the wicked enjoy anything for a long time, as if Job's enjoying stuff, and that God always gets the wicked, at the end of the day, at the end of before the end of history. And the central assertion, as I said, is in verse 5, the exulting of the wicked is short, the joy of the godless is but for a moment. There's a couple of verses that in the other parts of the Bible that also sound like this. I've seen a wicked, so Psalm 37, 35, and 36. Psalm 37, 35, and 36. I've seen a wicked, ruthless man spreading himself like a green laurel tree, but he passed away, and behold, he was no more. Though I sought him, he could not be found. The Zophar says that you're going to look for the wicked, he's not going to be able to be found in because he's gone. So we have here in the Psalms, the psalmist, who is that David? Who is the psalmist in Psalm 37? It is. It's David. David writes these words, right? And so I thought maybe we could look at Psalm 37 and see if maybe David is using this in a different context than the wicked, or than Zophar, rather. So Psalm 37, verse 1, fret not yourselves because of evildoers, be not envious of wrongdoers. So obviously a slightly different context. Nobody's envious of Job, who is thought to be the wrongdoer. For they will soon fade like the grass and wither like the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Now, this is what Jesus did, right? What was that passage? We just read it in, where was it? It was 2 Peter. 1 Peter 2:22. Listen to this. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. He continued trusting himself. He didn't threaten. He was trusting himself to God. He continued to do good. In fact, I think in Peter, sorry to do this. Actually, I'm not that sorry, but let me check. Doesn't it say in 1 Peter about Christians that if they're suffering, they're to continue to do good, right? I think it does say that. Oh, the word good is 17 times in 1 Peter. Probably the verse I'm looking for is here. Let's see. I think it's going to be chapter. There it is, chapter 4:19. It's the last reference. Therefore, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to a faithful Creator while doing good. Trust God. Do good. Psalm 37. Trust God. So if you hadn't seen that, I have never seen that in that link, and it's not in my footnotes as far as I can tell. But that is a clear reference to Psalm 37. Particularly verse 5, commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act, right? And then verse 3, trust in the Lord and do good. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light and your justice as the noonday. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his way, over the man who carries out evil devices. Okay, so the context here is there's an evil man who's carrying out evil devices, or there is a person who's profiting from evil and wickedness, and it could potentially frustrate a person or make a godly person, worry. That's what fret not. Don't worry. Don't be frustrated. And so the godly person is, in some sense, mentally suffering because of the wicked person who appears to be getting away with it and prospering. And he's told to commit his way to the Lord, to trust in the Lord, to be still before the Lord, to wait patiently for the Lord. You know, all these things, not he's having to wait. You know, what's he waiting for? Verse 8 or verse 7, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his way, over the man who carries out evil devices. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it tends only to evil. For the evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land. In just a little while, the wicked will be no more. This sounds like Zophar, right? He says the wicked are going to exalt only for a little while, and then God's going to cut them off. Though you look carefully at his place, he will not be there. So this verse 10 sounds pretty much exactly what Zophar said in there. But the meek will inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant peace. The wicked plots against the righteous and gnashes his teeth at him, but the Lord laughs at the wicked, for he sees that his day is coming.
Mm-hmm.
That is a reference to Judgment Day.
Right.
And in fact, all of these references to, say, dwelling in the land and inheriting the land, the meek will inherit the land, Jesus repeats that. That this idea of inheriting the land has come up. I think it comes up 4 times in the Psalm. This is an eschatological or a last days promise in the Old Testament. It isn't just about coming back into the land after the exile. Who wrote this? David wrote this. This was the high point. The reign of David and the reign of Solomon are the high point of the Jewish kingdom. Right? And after that, I mean, this is the biggest and best picture of Christ's kingdom. David's and Solomon's kingdom are the biggest and best picture of Christ's kingdom that we have in the Old Testament. And then after Solomon's sin, it falls apart, right? But here's David at the high point of the kingdom saying that those who are frustrated and worried and God's people who are looking at the wicked who are prospering, that they need to wait patiently because they will inherit the land. What does he mean? They're already in the land, right? This is an eschatological promise. He's talking about when the Messiah comes and he has restored us to himself and he has gathered all of his people and he has got his throne and we are all with him. He will fulfill all of those promises of which the land is just a type and a shadow, right? So he's making these promises, these references to inheriting the land are to be made or to be met. They're meant to be understood as in the Messianic kingdom type of fulfillment. And I think just thinking about who's wrote this down, this is David, would make it clear that he's not talking about you'll get to live in Jerusalem, because he's writing this to people who are living in Jerusalem and in Judah. So that means that the wicked will perish sometime before the Messiah comes and establishes his kingdom. But there'll be something like that. But it doesn't mean that the wicked are going to perish and be judged in this life right now. Just to continue, verse 13, the Lord laughs at the wicked, for he sees his day is coming. That's also stated in Psalm 2, that the Lord laughs at the wicked and speaks of a day in the future when the Son will crush all of his enemies. But that day is in the future, it's not like when he says, it's not the Zophar view that this is going to happen within the next, 20 years or something like that. It's something further than that. Verse 14, the wicked draw the sword and bend their bows to bring down the poor and the needy, to slay those whose way is upright. Their sword shall enter their own heart and their bows shall be broken. It's talked about irony in in the Isaiah class. This is more irony, right? They shoot with their bows um, and they stab with their swords, and their swords are going to be the instrument of their demise. Better is little with Better is the little that the righteous has than the abundance of many wicked. For the arms of the wicked shall be broken, but the Lord upholds the righteous. The Lord knows the days of the blameless, and their heritage will remain forever. They are not put to shame in evil times. In the days of famine they have abundance, but the wicked will perish. The enemies of the Lord are like the glory of the pastures. They vanish like smoke. They vanish away. The wicked borrows but does not pay back, but the righteous is generous and gives. For the blessed, those blessed by the Lord shall inherit the land, but those cursed by him shall be cut off. The steps of a man are established by the Lord when he delights in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be cast headlong, for the Lord holds his hand. That's an indication of God's people will, it doesn't say will, but it says when they suffer, it won't be uh, the death of them. It won't destroy them, shake their faith, that the Lord will still hold his hand and uphold him. 25, I have been young and now I'm old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken or his children begging for bread. He is ever lending generously and his children become a blessing. Turn away from evil and do good, so shall you dwell forever. For the Lord loves justice. He will not forsake his saints. They are preserved forever, but the children of the wicked shall be cut off. The righteous shall inherit the land and dwell upon it forever. See, these are eternal kingdom promises, right? These are not, you'll dwell in the land of Israel for the next 20 years and then die. This is, you're going to inherit the land and dwell in it forever. The mouth of the righteous utters wisdom, and his tongue speaks justice. The law of his God is in his heart. He does not. His steps do not slip. The wicked watches for the righteous and seeks to put him to death. The Lord will not abandon him to his power or let him be condemned when he is brought to trial. Wait for the Lord and keep his way, and he will exalt you to inherit the land. You will look on when the wicked are cut off. I've seen a wicked, ruthless man spreading himself like a green laurel tree, but he passed away, and behold, he was no more. Though I sought him, he could not be found. Mark the blameless and behold the upright, for there is a future for the man of peace. The transgressors shall be altogether destroyed. The future of the wicked shall be cut off. The salvation of the righteous is from the Lord. He is their stronghold in time of trouble. The Lord helps them and delivers them. He delivers them from the wicked and saves them because they take refuge in him. Yeah, beautiful psalm. So what I understand to be happening in the psalm is that the righteous are being portrayed as being in trouble. And what the righteous are supposed to do is wait on the Lord and wait patiently for him and trust in him and continue to do good, as Peter summarizes. And that the wicked, although some wicked are judged in this life, and David makes reference to one such person in verse 35 and 36, right? I've seen a wicked, ruthless man, but he passed away, and behold, he was no more. David is taking that, which I believe would be considered in the biblical worldview and in the real world, which is the same thing. That's rare. That's an exception, that the wicked person is judged in this life, loses all his things, children go begging, things like that. That doesn't happen too often, but David is aware of an example, and he takes that as proof or an indication that the God of justice will judge all the wicked on the last day. So I think that's what's going on there. It's a beautiful psalm. Psalm 73, similar. We're going to have a similar point. It has the lines, though, in verse 19, how they are destroyed in a moment, swept away utterly by terrors. And then also in Ezekiel 27:36, and you see this in a lot of the judgment oracles in Isaiah, which we've been looking at on Tuesday morning. But Ezekiel 27:36, the merchants among the peoples hiss at you, you have come to a dreadful end and shall be no more forever. So the rest of the Bible, so even though there are things in the Old Testament that sound like the same words that Zophar is saying, the rest of the Bible doesn't actually teach that all of the wicked are judged in this life. Sodom and Gomorrah is the exception. Okay. It isn't the rule of how God deals with people in this life. And Sodom and Gomorrah, or the flood, big disasters like that, big judgments of God like that, they are used in the Bible as pictures of the final judgment, not pictures of how God deals right now with the wicked in this life. The way God deals with the wicked in this life right now is many of them die prosperous and happy. Many of them get away with all kinds of terrible things and never get caught. Nobody's sin is entirely exposed in this life. So when we see the rest of the Bible, the other parts of the Bible, the non-Zophar parts of the Bible, saying words that sound like Zophar, we're to interpret them as saying, yes, there are some examples right now that God will judge the wicked because he's judged the wicked. Sodom and Gomorrah is an example that God will judge the wicked, but it isn't a pattern for how he does that in this age. So, but Zophar, if he knew about Sodom and Gomorrah, he would say that's what God always does, and that would be wrong for lots of reasons. Because how many people would still be alive 1 year after Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed? How many people would survive for a year without sinning? Right? The history of the world, it's just how long is it? Adam and Eve sinned, and now it's over.
If only.
So I think before we move into it's 7:57, so I'm going to stop here. We'll pick up in the next bit next week. Does anybody have any comments? I did a lot of talking there for the last half hour. Was that helpful at all to anybody?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Chuck.
Okay.
always.
Does anybody have anything else you want to add to that?
No.
Okay. I'm going to turn off the recording.